Hi there from Chicago. Thrilled to have you with us for the next hour. This is Big Ten Today. My name is Mike Hall. We've got a lot to get to. It is almost all focused on men's basketball. And if you've watched in the past, you've noticed there's such electric chemistry when Andy Katz and I are on TV together that they decided the only way to make it fair to other people is to put him out of the room when he is with me. And so, sure enough, we have sent him off. Andy, where are you?
Park, Maryland. Getting ready for Maryland, Wisconsin tonight. I will tell you the game is on our network, Big Ten Network. It's the first game of two before we have Northwestern Rutgers. Students are back, so they're expecting a pretty close to sellout situation, but that student wall will be head to toe, top to bottom. The flag situation when they run it down will be great. Atmosphere should be absolutely electric for this game. This should have been, by the way, a top 25 matchup. I advocated on Monday. I put Maryland in my top 25 and my Power 37 on March Madness. The AP top 25 voters apparently fell asleep watching too much NFL, did not pay attention to what Maryland did on the weekend because that game was on Sunday. Not opposite the Bills or Chiefs. It was before. You should have checked it out. And Maryland beat Indiana if people didn't know that. And Maryland should have been ranked, and this should be a top 25 game here in College Park.
Would you like to file a grievance?
I would, because I think a lot of the AP top 25 voters have some sort of Maryland bias because earlier in the season, when they knocked off Villanova and Syracuse, I know those two schools aren't the same they've normally been. They looked pretty darn good, and they couldn't get a sniff of the poll. Then they went out to the Northwest. They struggled. Okay, fine. Lost in, to the Northwestern game. All right, so you want to pause and wait. So let's see what they do on the road at Illinois, at Indiana. Swept them. They should have been ranked.
Well, this is, could be just an hour of Andy venting, which I'm not against, but our producer says we should instead start off with the big story. And so that is where we go to next, and that'll focus on the one game in the Big Ten last night, Michigan State playing Minnesota, or rather beating up Minnesota. A 22-point victory. It was all about that green and white defense. Gave up a grand total of 51 points. That's a season low for the Gophers. Snapped their three-game winning streak, too. MSU now hasn't lost since November. Here are the head coaches afterwards.
That's a good team. We had shots blocked at the rim, I think 3 or 4 layups. They got some athletes. They got a couple good young players. And I was just happy to get the win and still accomplish some goals. The rebounding was good, 13 offensive, and they only had 5, and overall 40-22 was a pretty good stat.
This is the first time this team has been in a position where I know that they did not take us lightly. When you beat 2 ranked teams and you get a win on the road, that staff is going to have their team on 10 to get ready, and no one's going to look past this game. And so we just haven't experienced that, and you could feel their intensity. You could feel how dialed they were into just obviously just physicality defensively, to guarding our stuff, to taking guys out of stuff, and then their precision offensively. And we've got to be able to learn from that.
Now, the main story to come from that game is the updated chase for Tom Izzo. He's now 1 win away from tying Bob Knight for most wins in conference play ever. 352 for the Iron Mountain man. We're almost there. He can tie it Saturday on the road against USC. Could then break it Tuesday at UCLA, at Pauley Pavilion. How wild would that be? Andy, you know basketball as well as anybody I know. You've covered the entirety of Izzo's head coaching career. You covered Bob Knight back in the day. What does this record that Tom Izzo is about to break mean to you?
Well, this may be blasphemy in Bloomington or even West Lafayette, and you see Gene Cady up there. But I think what Tom Izzo has accomplished in this conference is more impressive, in large part because the eras that he has coached in have changed over the last, 25 years. We're now in this money era, this transfer portal era. He went through the one and done era. Okay. Whereas Bob Knight and Gene Katie, I don't want to, I'm not trying to be dismissive of what they've accomplished. I just think it was more difficult for Tom Izzo to get to this number because of what he had to navigate in this league, which also, by the way, expanded multiple times during his tenure. And if you remember, when Bob Knight was dominating the Big Ten, and to some extent Gene Katie, and yes, you had Lou Henson at Illinois, you also had a program like at Wisconsin, and I was there in the late 80s, that was terrible, all right, in men's basketball. And so they were getting beat up on. Tom Izzo's doing this at a time when Wisconsin has obviously had a complete 180 from Dick Bennett. Actually, before that, Stu Jackson got it going, and then Dick Bennett, and then Bo Ryan, and now Greg Gard. So there's a program they've had to compete with. He had to go through and compete against those great Ohio State teams when Thad Matta went to the Final Four. The Michigan teams with John Beilein, our now colleague at Big Ten Network, where they played for 2 national championships. So I just think that what Tom Izzo has done from where he came from, it is more impressive to be the all-time wins leader in the Big Ten, which of course will happen, whether it's the next game or the game after, or within the next 2 weeks. It's just, first of all, I will say this, and people say this about people, but it is true. I find him to be a better human being than coach, and that's saying something because he's a pretty great coach as a Hall of Famer, but always extends himself, is accessible, and just has a tremendous heart. And so I applaud him, and I think what he has accomplished is remarkable.
I asked him once about why he treats people so well, whether it's someone highly regarded or low in a status, and he was like, it's one of the things I learned from Judd. Everybody's got a job to do, and you should respect that they're just trying to do what they need to do. And it is funny, too, you think of how high Heathcote was on a mantle that Izzo put him in, and yet he's surpassed him. I mean, Izzo was a Hall of Famer 9 years ago. I mean, it's really incredible what he's done so far.
One quick thing on that list that it's going to be very difficult to see going forward. And we'll see if John Shire can stick it out at Duke and be successful. But what Tom Izzo did at Michigan State and what Matt Painter did at Purdue, where you are the successor to a legend, to a Hall of Famer, and then you take it to another level, that's almost impossible. We saw how difficult it was, even though I know Kevin Ollie won a title, didn't last at UConn, or the multiple successors that followed Lute Olson at Arizona. Clearly what happened at UCLA post John Wooden. It is incredibly difficult. Kyle Neptune is having a hard time following Jay Wright at Villanova. It's really hard to do what you see Tom Izzo and Matt Painter have done following Judd Heathcote and Gene Katie. And I should mention at Indiana. Yes, Mike Davis went to that Final Four in 2002, but they've had a hard time having any kind of consistency after Bob Knight.
Let's talk about last night's win for Michigan State. A few things stuck out to me. One, their defense continues to be incredible. 2, Trey Holloman steps up when they need them to. And 3, Andy, Cohen Carr can dunk a basketball.
What's great about this Michigan State team is the 3 freshmen, and I know Fears had obviously the tragic shooting situation last year, recovered from that. So he wasn't going to sort of transfer after that. He had to recover. But the fact that Fears, Booker, and Carr all returned after not having great freshman years for various reasons, and they all got better. And that's sort of what's supposed to happen, but what isn't happening in today's college basketball. And so now we're seeing the benefit of that. Trey Holloman, another great example. He has continued to get better, and he has stayed. The combination of bigs, some have been in the program, some are transfers, and it's worked to where they've got this sort of community of bigs, and it's working for them. Now, the other side of this start for Michigan State, and it's a fair criticism, but it's television driven, and it happens to Duke and Carolina in the ACC. Michigan State's the draw. And so Michigan State's schedule for all the network partners in the Big Ten tends to be backloaded because you want the better games against the peer competition in February and March. So in their 9-0 start, they've played one other contender, Illinois, and that game was at home. But they got to play everybody. So we're going to know in the next 3 weeks really how good Michigan State is, because here come the rest of those big-time games, including the trip out west to LA to play UCLA and USC. But this team, and I saw them early in the season, I was with them in Maui. That game against Carolina on that third day of the Maui Invitational was massive for them. Tom Izzo has spoken to me about that, getting that win in overtime. Their one loss there was to Memphis. Memphis is clearly a top 20-25 team. And then earlier in the year to Kansas, when Kansas was playing better in the Champions Classic. So they've been tested, and they're just on a great run, especially offensively of late.
You know what? I wanted to ask you this a while about Michigan State. You mentioned USC is coming up, but I want to ask you something you've seen from them all year. If I'm looking at a box score from a Purdue game, any game, I'm going to look and say, oh, well, Braden Smith did this, and that was some incredible statistic. You could look at Wisconsin, and Blackwell or Tanjay will have done something. Maryland, Derek Queen would have done 25 points or something like that. Andy, every Michigan State box score, their leading score is like 13 points. And then their second leading score is 9. Like, there is no one person who's putting up crazy numbers almost every single game, and they haven't lost a game since November.
Well, and that's why, and I felt bad, but, Jaden Akins kind of challenged me at Big Ten Media Day. He's like, hey, you didn't have me as like a first teamer. And that's because I kind of looked at this roster. I'm not always right on a lot of things, but I looked at Michigan State roster, and I didn't see like a bona fide star, someone who was going to score 20, 25 points a game, 18, somewhere in that range. I thought Akins could be their leading scorer, but maybe not at that level. He's played well. He's had a really good year. I think he's an all Big Ten player. But is he going to be Big Ten MVP, Player of the Year, if they win the league? No. And that's because he doesn't have those numbers. And yet, I'm sure he would take winning the league over that award. And so that's the beauty of this team, is that they don't rely on one player, even though they're sort of their potential leading guy, certainly can get those kind of that point production for them when needed.
As for Minnesota, the win streak ends. Obviously not a bad loss for them. How do they avoid this loss turning them back to what we saw from them, say, a few weeks ago?
Well, I'm not going to blame our digital team because they do outstanding work, but Alex Rue asked me to do a Minnesota video, and I did, and I'm high on the Gophers, but people probably glossed over. I made one point in there about this road game, and I'm kidding, of course, because of a little digital jinx, because after I've done these teams have lost, but so maybe there's something to it. But I did say after Michigan State on the road, I thought the rest of their road games, they had a chance to win a couple, and I think they could win all their home games, and that includes playing Illinois and Wisconsin at home. I knew that this Michigan State game was going to be incredibly tough for them. It's a tough matchup for them. They're coming off of winning 3 in a row. The Spartans were not going to take them lightly. But if you look at that schedule over your right shoulder, or maybe actually, I don't know if that may be the F monitor. I'm not sure, but it's somewhere over your shoulder there, unless you're staring at it. And those are winnable games for this Minnesota team if they play the way they did most recently. And Dawson Garcia has been an all Big Ten type player of late. So I am confident in the Gophers that they will stay above that line, make the Big Ten tournament. And in the current makeup of this league, if you are above that line, so you're one of the 15 teams that's going to be in Indianapolis, I'm pretty convinced you're going to be in a postseason tournament. Is that the crown, which the league is contracted to send the 2 teams that don't make the NCAA tournament to Las Vegas? That's that week of the Final Four. Or is it the NIT? Because the NIT is going to take the next group of teams. And so I'm convinced this Minnesota team, if it can just get above 500, get in that Big Ten tournament, they'll be in one of those 2 postseason events.
Yeah, we've seen how good they can be. Now we'll see if they can continue to be more consistent with that throughout the remainder of Big Ten play. Lots more coming up from Andy and his Blue. Here to talk about Coaches versus Cancer. Brad, first off, on a formal level, thank you for everything you've done for me and my family. Those small gestures, they really do go a long way to people who are fighting this stuff. Take me back to your beginning involvement with Coaches versus Cancer. How did you first decide this is something I'm going to be a part of?
Yeah, it was Lon Kruger. I was an assistant at Kansas State. Lon is obviously a legend there, one of the all-time great players. in the history of that program. And Lon was coaching at UNLV, started an event that was, he reached out to us, and I've known Lon for a long time, and said, hey, how about bringing some guys out, and we're doing it for a good cause, and this is what it's about. And then in future communications, we brought a big group out from Kansas State, all in the name of raising money for cancer research and Lon's event, but also to bring attention to it. And it was golf. It was fun. It was a great event. It still is one of the elite events in all the country that we do for Coaches versus Cancer. But it's just something that I felt great about. And it's impacted so many people. As I became a head coach, you find out you have a little bit of a ramp to continue to talk and grow this. And we've had a lot of fun with it here in all my stops in Nacogdoches, Texas, Stillwater, and then obviously here in Champaign.
But there's a difference between being involved, which is good, and being the chair like you are. I mean, you don't just wear sneakers one week. You're heavily involved in this mission. It's something that affects you year-round. Why be so involved?
You know what? And I'll be honest, it makes me feel really good. That's real, and that's selfish, but I it's what it's about. I love people, to me, I'm a little bit in disbelief that we haven't found a cure yet.
Right.
We can send people to the moon. We can do this. We've got AI. We've got all of this. I'm not near smart enough to understand all of that. But what I am is somebody who loves people. I think this is something that has affected every single person that I know in some capacity. People I work with, people I've been around, family, right on down the list, and to see some of the suffering that people go through with this is just mind-numbing. And it's just my way of trying to give back in something that has given so much to me, and Coaches versus Cancer and the American Cancer Society, what Norm Stewart started years ago. We're so proud of all the work that all the coaches do, the referees, everybody involved. And, I'm just doing my little part, but really, really happy to do it. Really happy to jump in. And Natalie Morrison and her group do a phenomenal job of helping all the coaches push through this and do a lot to bring notoriety to it.
And raising money, obviously incredibly important, but also raising awareness is part of the mission as well. And I want to ask you, we say all the time screening, make sure you get screened. And I know, as someone who's gone through this in my family, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know screening, that's a term in basketball, right? So when we say that to people, Brad, in the very simplest way, what and how should someone be doing to do that?
Yeah, go see your doctor. It's not hard. Make an appointment. Go see your doctor. Get your blood work done. Get a test. And we all, as we're finding out over the years that cancer starts younger and younger and younger, and it's affecting people at all ages, but especially as we age. It's not that hard to go do that and to find that out. And it's better. You're so much better off when you can find it early, if you do have it, and it affects so many people. But it just takes a simple phone call to a physician to go get it done, and we can't be afraid to hear what the result is. But boy, if we can catch it early, the success rate is so much higher. And it's just, it's our way of bringing attention to it in Coaches versus Cancer. And that's all we talk about is yes, we have to raise money for research, but people can do so much to help themselves by just picking up the phone, calling their doctor, getting a screen and blood work done and finding out.
One of the things I love about the way you approach this, Brad, is what you said a couple times is you can do these things and have fun. Like, it's a horrible, awful disease, but in trying to beat it, you can find the joy in life in trying to beat it. So, if you don't mind, can you explain a little bit about the event that you run in the spring and how much fun is had at those things?
Yeah, Gordyville is unique, and it's our event here. It started in a house with a few people, and a few people that had the wherewithal to give some money, and it was a very small amount raised at the time, but it was great. It moved to a hotel parking lot where we served some cold beer out of a few horse troughs, and sat around and laughed and played a little music, and lasted a couple hours. And then that kind of has grown into what is at Gordyville now, which is a unique spot. It's a sale barn, rodeo arena. It's about 15-20 minutes outside of Champaign. And now we have 1,700 plus people in attendance. We raise over $500,000. We bring in coaches. We bring in TV personalities. It's a blast, and we just set up there and we literally have fun. It starts in the early afternoon with a very relaxed happy hour. Everybody's in their blue jeans, non-formal. It's not a super expensive event to attend, but my goodness, and everybody's had fun. We've had the Big Ten coaches in. We've had Bill Raftery. We bring in different panels every year, different groups, and we'll be announcing soon. April 16th is this year's event, and anybody's more than welcome to come. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger every year, and raising more money and bringing more attention to it in the state of Illinois.
I love it, man. All right, before we let you go, I do want to get a thought in on your current team, Illinois, having overall a very good season. It has been a tough couple weeks with some really good teams you've played, some health issues with players, maybe some tough whistles here and there. What have you learned about your team the last 5 games or so?
Yeah, we're good. We're resilient. I think you always come out better after some adversity. I think one of the challenges, obviously, we played a couple of games without Kasparas, and now we've had the flu bug just really demolish our team a little bit in a stretch, and now Tommy's got mono. So we're making do. We're having to shift. We're having to be agile, so to speak, and light on our feet with some of the things we're doing, but we're playing solid, and we got a really good team. I love the ceiling on this team, and we get Tommy back in the mix. I like where this team can go.
Got Nebraska coming up on Thursday. Brad Underwood, head coach of the Illini. Thanks for all you do for Coaches versus Cancer. For me personally, what you've done sure means an awful lot, and I appreciate it. Best of luck the rest of the way, man.
Our pleasure, and my best to your wife, Mike. Thank you.
We got a hoops doubleheader coming your way. Top 20 ranked Wisconsin takes on Maryland, followed by Rutgers and Northwestern. It all starts with the Journey at 6 Eastern, 5 Central, then the tip-off show, 6:30 Eastern, 5:30 Central time. Well, Maryland's been playing some good ball of late. 3 straight conference wins. Started against Nebraska in a tight one. Jacoby Gillespie was really starting to impress. Had 22 points, including the go-ahead layup in the final minute as the Terps fought off the Huskers. Then their big win came against Illinois on the road. Juju Reese, 27 and 17. Derek Queen was a blizzard, throwing in 25 points. Gillespie added 15, and the Terps forced 16 turnovers to get Maryland's best win of the season. Then on to their closest win of the year, beating Indiana by 1 on the road again. Rodney Rice, with 7 seconds left, hits a three-pointer to take the lead and give them the win. And with that, we bring back Andy Katz in his blue screen. Andy, this is a 3-game stretch that has not just pushed Maryland near the top of the Big Ten standings, but it feels like it's really shifted the confidence level in College Park. You agree?
I do. And again, I will continue to hammer this. This should be a top 25 matchup. If you're just joining us, this should be a top 25 game tonight. The AP top 25 voters asleep. They were getting ready for the Bills, Chiefs, or something on Sunday. They did not pay attention that Maryland got a sweep at Illinois, at Indiana. I know they struggled on their other road games at Northwestern and out in the Northwest. but what have you done for me lately? This Maryland team behind Julian Reese, my national player of the week, was unbelievable. Double-double machine, playing next to Derek Queen, one of the top freshmen in the country. And then the backcourt. Kevin Willard did an outstanding job in the portal, as he has in the past, getting Selton Miguel, adding Rodney Rice and Jacoby Gillespie. These are players that worked well together. They all can score in a variety of ways. They're winners. And that five, I would put up against really almost any team in the country in terms of being competitive with a chance to win. Are they going to get to the Final Four? I'm not saying that, but this is a team, I really believe this is a team, when they are clicking, that potentially could be a second weekend team in the NCAA tournament.
See, he's such a TV pro. You know, at 11:01 Central, he did this exact same rant, but it's the bottom of the hour, so he's like, we got a new audience. I'm going to just do the exact same thing. Can't assume it's the same audience. I'm proud of you, Andy.
Never assume.
But we do have a ranked team for them to face, regardless, in tonight's game. So how do they do it? How do they get this big win with eyeballs on them?
Well, first of all, tons of credit to Greg Gard of sort of adjusting to his personnel. And they've got scores. They get up and down. They are one of the better offenses we've seen from the Badgers in quite some time, maybe going back 10 years to when they went to those back-to-back Final Fours in 14 and 15. John Tonje, who, as you know, went to your alma mater, Missouri, was hurt after he was a big-time scorer at Colorado State, and people kind of forgot about him. Outside of the one game at USC where he didn't score, and yet the Badgers still won, he's been really consistent. I saw him get over 40 against Arizona. He's got that in him. And then you pair him with John Blackwell. Blackwell is a great case, and we talked about this early in the show. If you missed us, we talked about the freshman class to sophomores in Michigan State. Here's another great example. Wisconsin's got a couple with Blackwell and Winter. Guard, big, stayed true to everything, got better. And Blackwell has now become one of the best scorers in the Big Ten. You pair him up with Tonje experience. Klesmit is back, another experienced guard. Stephen Kral's in his 12th year. And, he's obviously an experienced big as well. The problem here for Wisconsin's bigs will be dealing with the sort of, the ferociousness, if you will, of the physical size of Derek Queen, because they're going to have to really just try to keep him off the backboard. And Kral and Winter are a little bit more sort of Euro bigs. They're not going to mix it up as much. I think it's harder on the defensive side for Queen to come all the way up to guard them. That's going to be hard. So actually, it's going to be difficult on both sides because that's going to be hard for Queen. But on the other side, it's going to be hard for the Wisconsin bigs to be inside. The guard play, I think, is a bit of a wash. I think you've got shooters on both sides, and the big X factor will be this crowd. Those highlights you just saw against Nebraska, students were not in session for that home game. So it looked a little dead in here. And as you know, here at Xfinity, it's a huge place. It's very cavernous if they don't have it packed. And that won't be the case tonight. They've got the complete side wall, where they run the flag down in the second half. That's going to be a great atmosphere. It's some sort of beachy kind of theme tonight. There's going to be it's a gold rush, even though gold rush was inland California, not necessarily by the coast. So I don't know if that's sort of what they're doing with that, but they're going to have sunglasses on. They're going to have their yellow shirts. And so it's going to be a great atmosphere.
I'm curious if the game operations have a more succinct way of describing what the theme is tonight, but we'll find out later on this evening. All right, that game and its incredible theme apparently is going to be on the Big Ten Network, but that is only one of two games. The other one is Rutgers-Northwestern, and this is such a fun matchup. You got a battle of two amazing scorers for each team, right? Rutgers has Ace Bailey, that's 19 points a game, tied for first in the Big Ten. 1 point less than him is Dylan Harper, 18 a game, top 4 in the league. They play Northwestern with Nick Martinelli, tied with Bailey and Dawson Garcia for the lead in scoring, while Brooks Barnheiser is 8th in the conference with 17 a game. So, Andy, that's 4 guys in the top 8 scoring in the league, 3 of them in the top 4, and they're going to be going head-to-head tonight. That should be a blast.
Well, first of all, I hope so. I've been in contact with Rutgers earlier this afternoon. They're kind of non-committal on Dylan Harper. He was ill, then he was hurt. They said they'll let us know after shoot around. So we don't have 100% commitment that Harper is playing tonight. My gut is he will, but we don't know that 100% yet. So let's assume that he does. And if that's the case, you've got two desperate teams. Neither team wants to be left out of the Big Ten tournament. Both teams have NCAA tournament aspirations. Obviously, Northwestern's profile is much better than Rutgers. No, not even close right now. Northwestern still has a mile to go, but Rutgers isn't really even in the frame right now because they've got to get, quality road wins. They've got to beat teams above them, way above them in the Big Ten. And that's been an issue. I mean, they had that road win at Nebraska, but right now Nebraska's in their neighborhood. They've got to beat teams way above them. They missed opportunity against Michigan State Saturday at Madison Square Garden. That would have been a great one to get for Rutgers. So now these opportunities are starting to get, fewer and fewer as we get closer here into February. For Northwestern, I want to bring this back to the top of the show when I was talking about Minnesota, where I was not shocked that they lost to Michigan State. And if you'd taken that game by itself, you wouldn't say it was that big a deal. The problem is they struggled early. For Northwestern, the fact that early in the year they let that game go against Butler, Iowa in the league, the three-pointer, the Penn State game they thought they had, that was a hard one to swallow. The Michigan, they were up in that game. They ended up losing in overtime. So I did not expect them to beat Illinois on Sunday. Certainly didn't expect them to get sort of pummeled in the first half. Remember, they beat Illinois at home in overtime. They also have that home win over Maryland. So for Northwestern, they've got to take care of teams that are below them. They've got to get in, somehow they got to find a way to get to 500 in the Big Ten and have that 500 be the right teams. If Barnhizer, he's been banged up, bloody nose, all sorts of issues, but when he is healthy on that court, and it's hard to keep him off of it, can play 40, 43 minutes if it's extra period. He and Martinelli, tough matchup, the way they sort of use the angles to score. The big key for Northwestern will be two things. One, Matt Nicholson, can he be the dominant player as a rim protector inside? He's not going to score a lot for you. And then Ty Berry. He got off to it last week, made some big shots against Indiana off the bench. If he can do that again here, back-to-back Wednesdays, then I think Northwestern wins at home. Will there be a Gold Rush beachy theme in Evanston? Actually, I'm trying to remember. There is a theme tonight for Northwestern, but it's not beach. I should have been paying attention, but I did see. I will say this about game management. They did an outstanding job, if you remember, when Martinelli hit the game winner on that baseline to beat Maryland. Within a second, they had the white and purple smoke shoot up. It was very akin, not the same level of importance, but when Chris Jenkins hit that three to beat North Carolina in the NCAA tournament and the confetti popped right when he hit it. Perfect timing. Shout out to the Northwestern game management. They timed it perfectly. Ball goes in for Martinelli, and there comes the white smoke. It's the important things, really. That's what we cover, and that's what we tackle. We want to really dive in. Tell you what, let's call an audible and continue talking about game operations when we come back after this. No, we won't do that? All right, fair enough. Look. It is a cannot miss Friday night wrestling doubleheader. First, Iowa and Penn State collide. Number 1 versus number 2. And then 6th-ranked Nebraska clashing with Wisconsin. Coverage begins with our wrestling pregame. 6:30 Eastern, 5:30 Central. Here's Tom Brands on the squad he's facing.
As far as the event, you keep it in perspective. But where we want to go, it's big. I mean, you're wrestling the best team in the country, and it's a measuring stick. And there's individual matchups that have postseason seeding implications, and so you got to be ready. And it's really no different than any other weekend, but it's different. I mean, it's different. And look forward to this competition. That's the main thing. Look forward to this. This is an opportunity again. And the unique thing about it is you're going into the number 1 team in the country's environment.
Well, Tom Brands is truly an elite coach. And in the basketball side of things in the Big Ten, there are plenty of great coaches. But Andy wanted to talk about the 5 coaches this year that have done the best job coaching this season in particular. So no, not necessarily in order of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but there are 5 guys on your list. One of them in there resides in Madison. Why is Greg Gard on that list for you?
Well, again, if you weren't watching the whole show, and sometimes people aren't watching you and I, Mike, the entire hour, but I mentioned this earlier. Greg Gard has adjusted to his personnel. So I don't want to hear anything about, oh, Wisconsin always plays this way and it's slow and no. He's got scoring guards, scoring bigs, okay? John Tonje comes over from Missouri. He was a big-time scorer at Colorado State. He has given him the freedom to do so. The last time a player scored over 40, Frank Kaminsky back in 2014, or I think it was 14, the 13-14 season. Well, guess what? Tonje did it against Arizona. Then you've got John Blackwell, who improved from freshman to sophomore year as a scorer. He's had the freedom. They go up and down. Their bigs are allowed to shoot, Winter and Crawl. And then Klesman obviously returns. So while they may not be as tight defensively as they've been in the past, offensively, they're a joy to watch. They've scored over 100 points multiple times, 21 threes against Iowa. That's the kind of thing Iowa does, and Wisconsin did it. So I think Greg's done an outstanding job of changing to his personnel and making sure he maximizes that talent.
It's been pretty consistent for Gard at Wisconsin, but over in Ann Arbor, it has not been consistent. I mean, Andy, it's hard for people maybe to remember, but Michigan was really not good last year, and it is quite a change this season. How come?
Well, because Dusty May, first of all, we know he's a proven winner. He took Florida Atlantic, okay, to the Final Four. That just doesn't happen. And then he put together just an outstanding roster with the pieces fit, okay? That's not easy to do. And he selected the right players in the portal. I think they only got 2 guys that returned that made any kind of significant contribution from a year ago. Of the Florida Atlantic guys, there were 3 in the portal. The biggest, sort of highest profile one was Janelle Davis. He goes to Arkansas. They're struggling mightily. Elijah Martin, having a good year, and Florida's having a great year. Okay, fine. But you know what? He adds the guy that he needed the most in Vlad Golden, who potentially could be Big Ten Player of the Year. Then, look what he adds with Danny Wolf. Yale, winner. What did Yale do last year in the NCAA tournament? Up in Spokane, they knocked off Auburn, led by Danny Wolf. No one thought that you could pair Wolf and Golden together. Area 51, we saw the Big Ten Journey segment on it, and they've worked so well together, seamlessly. And then you add Donaldson from Auburn, another winner. Okay, so he made the right choices. Have they had some lapses at times at the end of games against Arkansas, Oklahoma? Sure, and that outing against Purdue. But overall, outstanding job from Dusty May.
Matt Painter does an outstanding job every year. Sometimes you could overlook how good of a coach he is.
Well, look, you have the Player of the Year 2 years in a row. It's Zach Edey, and everything funnels through him, so you got to make some adjustments. Braden Smith comes back as a preseason Player of the Year. He's lived up to the hype, but also getting Trey Kaufman-Renn ready to take the mantle as a big man. Another outstanding job from Matt Painter. They're a contender again. With similar core pieces, but then adding in developmental pieces from the program. That's what Purdue does. People don't stray, they just get better.
We had Brad Underwood on earlier, your Illini head coach. Why do you have him in your top 5 coaching jobs this season?
I mean, the whole roster was essentially gutted off an Elite Eight team. So, and the one guy that was going to contribute the most, Ty Rodgers, he ends up redshirting. So the combination of international, and I did a game down there a couple weeks ago, and Brad was saying right after the season, they were like, we got to go international. They went overseas. They get a pro in Yakachonis, who could also be Big Ten Player of the Year. Tomislav is, Ivicic has had a great year. He's hurt, right? He's actually out now with mono. But, Henrik Hummerkhaus from Evansville has developed, obviously, and done a great job. Montrez, he's done an outstanding job sort of filling in there, Johnson. So all the pieces right now, and obviously Kylan Boswell coming back home from Arizona to Champaign. The pieces fit. They're just scratching the surface of getting better, and they've got Final Four potential.
We had Underwood on our show in the second segment, but the first segment was all about what's happening in East Lansing. Tom Izzo about to set a record to make him the greatest coach in Big Ten history. He might be the best coaching job this year.
Yeah, look, he didn't win as many national championships as Bob Knight, but I think he will go down as the best Big Ten men's basketball coach in history. As I stated at the top of the show, he had to do it in multiple errors, dealing with one and done, now the portal, NIL. He keeps winning. They're undefeated in the Big Ten. They haven't lost since Maui, that second game in Maui, and his players got better. Those freshmen stayed, and Fears, Carr, Booker, Holloman has gotten better. Committee, a big men committee inside. Everyone plays a role. Jaden Akins took the baton. This team is scoring at a higher clip. They're defending. They're getting out and running. This is a Michigan State team that could get back to the Final Four.
All right, we're not quite done with Andy. We've got more to come in our final segment from him. In fact, he's going. Here's a look at the latest Big Ten men's basketball standings. Now, things are going to be different when we get to early March and the Big Ten tournament comes, and that's what those lines on the graphic here are. So the first line on the top left, everyone above that gets a double bye. They won't be playing the first 2 rounds of the men's tournament. Everyone above that second yellow line will get a bye. Everyone above the red on the right side will play in the tournament. And then there will be those teams that don't make it. 15 teams will play in the Big Ten men's basketball tournament. 3 will not. So, Andy, if you had to predict who will be the top 4 seeds in the Big Ten tournament, who would it be?
Well, I feel fairly comfortable in, this is not breaking news here, but I think Michigan State, Purdue, and Illinois, those will be the top 3. The question is, who's going to be number 4? And there's probably going to be a lot of tiebreakers. And to me, there's probably 3 candidates there with Wisconsin, Maryland, and Michigan. Based on sort of the way the schedule lays out, I'm actually leaning Maryland getting the 4th because Maryland has already done all the West Coast stuff. They've had, UCLA came in, they went to the Northwest. Wisconsin has to go to Michigan State, has to go to Purdue. And that's the thing. It's kind of scheduling matters here. And Michigan's loss to Purdue the other night and the way in which they lost was a bit of a red flag to me. I'm not saying that Oregon and UCLA can't climb back up, but I would lean Maryland among those other 3 to get the final spot of the double bye.
Interesting. That makes the game that you're at a little more interesting today as well. What about the last 4 teams into the Big Ten tournament, which is a thing we've never had a chance to talk about before because that was never the case, as this is the first year with 18 teams in the league?
Yeah, so, no offense to Washington, but they're the only team I would comfortably say I don't think will make the Big Ten tournament. So there's really a logjam of who's going to be, which teams are going to avoid those other 2 spots that don't make it. And I think the last 4 teams in the Big Ten tournament, in some order, are going to be Minnesota, Northwestern, Penn State, and probably Iowa, which would, in my thinking, actually leave USC and Rutgers joining Washington as the 3 that don't make it. That's a little bit of a tweak that I had, from a few weeks ago where I had Minnesota in, and if I'm not mistaken, I had USC making the tournament, but they've struggled of lately. So I'm flipping them. We'll see. Minnesota's got to go out to the West Coast. We'll see how it plays out.
Right. Well, I think what's going to be interesting about this new format is those last 2 weeks will then really matter, even for the teams that are at the bottom of the league, that there might not have been as much emphasis for those final 3 or 4 games of the season. It's going to add another reason to watch those games. Andy, you kept your grievances to a minimum. I'm proud of you, sir. Good work, man. See you later.